Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. I'm Laura Schara, your host for today, and I have a very exciting topic that we are going to be chatting about today on Minnesota Bound podcast. I have the pleasure of having Angela Grill with me today, who's a wildlife biologist for the Three Rivers Park District. And the reason I reached out to Angela is because I have a fascination with dragonflies. And today's podcast is all about dragonflies. And Angela, welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be on the other end. So thanks. Anytime dragonflies come up, I'm always honored to talk about them.
Well, I didn't really realize how fascinating dragonflies were until I had the pleasure of attending the Dragonfly Festival, which is a festival that Three Rivers Park District puts on. And it really is interesting on how really, I don't even know what the word is, just really how fascinating dragonflies are. And a quote from you that you had emailed me when we were setting up this podcast is you said, dragonflies were your gateway insect to becoming obsessed with all insects. Yes. Which I thought was very humorous. And I can understand why. I think I don't even know where to start, but I guess where we could start is, dragonflies are actually a prehistoric insect.
Right. That's one of the first interesting, facts out of the gate to get people excited is they're one of the most prehistoric insects we have, which means 250, we're talking 300 million years ago that these insects were on our planet. And things were a little bit different then, obviously. So they were huge. They were a lot bigger than, maybe we see a 3-inch wingspan on a dragonfly is an average thing. But, back then it was probably you're talking 2 to 4 feet is what some fossils show.
Yeah. Could you imagine hearing, dragonflies are noisy today. Could you imagine how loud they were back then?
Yeah, that'd be a little bit scarier. I don't know that I would have been the same fan of dragonflies as I am now, because I appreciate that I can catch them in a net and hold them and look at them. Having the roles, the roles reversed there, I think would have a different opinion.
Totally. And they, at the actual Dragonfly Festival, they showed a kind of a sample of what a dragonfly would have looked like back in the prehistoric era. And literally it's bigger than your arm. So just to give you a visual of how big a dragonfly used to be. But what's fascinating as well about dragonflies is how important they are to our environment.
Right. Yeah. And I think, yeah, they're really important. I think, a lot of people now are jumping on that insect bandwagon, so to speak, with pollinators. But really, I feel like it started even earlier with the dragonflies. And a lot of that has to do with, their importance is linked to water. And I think for a lot of people, when, we do events like the Dragonfly Festival at Eastman Nature Center, or we have a table set up at Monarch Fest, people are always amazed and ask the biggest question of what is that in that tub of water? Because we'll generally have some tubs out and we will have dragonfly babies or their nymphs in the water to showcase this really fascinating thing, which is that they have dual lives. They're not always in the air. They spend actually a majority of their life in the water.
And that's really fascinating that they are born in the water. And then what is, kind of the quick synopsis of a lifespan of the dragonfly? How long are they underwater before they emerge?
Yeah, and that can really vary, which I think, again, there's a lot of diversity even within just the dragonflies here in Minnesota. But again, when the kids or adults walk up and point to those bins, they kind of look like aquatic spiders. Some people will put them, but they come in all different shapes and sizes based on the species. And yeah, that's a complex question because, again, it can vary. I would say on average, most dragonflies are the aquatic nymph form for maybe 1 to 3 years is about the average. But some of them, the larger dragonflies that we maybe find in northern Minnesota, where it's a little bit cooler, they can take longer to develop. So we see anywhere from 5 to 7 years maybe they're spending in the water before they come out as a flying adult.
Isn't that fascinating? Do we know what the average age of a dragonfly is, their lifespan?
As an adult, they don't live as long. So again, they do spend a bulk of their time in the water. But I would say altogether, as an adult, it's, weeks, months at most. We also, to even just, if you're not even, I haven't gotten you hooked on them yet, some of them migrate. So, we think of the monarch, we think of birds migrating, but people always forget there's other insects that migrate besides the monarch, and dragonflies do that as well. So some of those species might be a little bit longer lived, but again, not more than maybe a couple months. There's a lot of things that eat dragonflies, so they don't live too long as adults. But yeah, an average span can really, like, you're talking, if we picked one, let's say we picked our largest dragonfly in Minnesota, which is called the dragon hunter. That's correct.
I love that name.
Yeah, cool dragonfly. You're going to know this dragonfly when you see it buzzing by. And this is a more northern Minnesota. Maybe like if you go even half an hour north of the cities, you'll start to see this dragonfly. But it's so big. Like you feel like a bird's flying by you, and it's actually a dragonfly. And so that is the one that can spend the most time as an aquatic nymph for like 5 to 7 years. So then as an adult, it's probably only living a couple months. So again, the oldest dragonfly you're going to have in hand is maybe, at most a year to 3 years old. But that dragon hunter has spent a lot of life in the water.
Isn't that amazing? And do we know how far they migrate?
Yeah, and I was trying to look this up again so that I could have the numbers. It's kind of a little bit complex because some of them, do multiple generations, just like the monarch. And really, there's still a lot of research coming out. Technology is allowing us to track smaller things now. So they have actually been able to put radios on something like the common green darner, which is probably one of the more popular dragonflies that you see, and people, it's everywhere. It's pretty common, but this one actually migrates. And so I believe they're known to migrate all the way from like southern Canada all the way down to the Gulf Coast.
Wow.
So that's pretty impressive. And one of the cool things that kind of led to this discovery of them migrating was that they found, Hawk Ridge up north in Duluth.
Yes.
And so they'll watch the raptors as they're coming through. Well, they would see the kestrels go through, and then they would see these large numbers of common green darners. Well, it turns out that these kestrels are following the common green darners migration because, hey, it's like a Happy Meal. They get that on the go, and they just follow it the whole way of their migration.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
So when they get to their migration endpoint, I'm assuming, do they migrate all the way back, or is that the end of their lives?
Yep. So it's like the multi-generational thing. So as they're heading south, they might be ovipositing and laying eggs, but that adult isn't going to return back to Minnesota. But what's really cool is that in the spring, it's the first dragonfly we see. And it can be often just as the ice is coming off or just as the snow is melting, you'll see this dragonfly and be like, wait a minute, how did that happen so quickly? And those are the ones that are migrating back from the south. But they likely are the ones that, was a laid egg from the one migrating in the fall, and now it's emerged in the spring somewhere warmer, and then it makes its way up here.
Wow, that is fascinating. Coming up, we're going to chat about why dragonflies are so important to our environment. But first, a word from Voyager Saunas.
Hey there, Bill Shirk, the man about the woods. You know what? It's time to relax, and Voyager can help. Voyager builds custom saunas for your home, backyard, business, and you know what? The pick of the Shirk family, we love Voyager's mobile saunas that go anywhere we want to go. Clear grade cedar benches, spray foam insulation, Kuma wood-fired stoves, or Hilo electric heaters. These are Finnish-influenced hand-built saunas that will last a lifetime. They're constructed with care by the hometown Voyagers team. The Shirk family loves our Voyager mobile sauna. Voyager, a Minnesota movement influenced by Finnish culture. Visit VoyagerSaunas.com and get ready to distress. Trust me, it works.
Speaking of clean water for dragonflies, I'm also picky about clean water, especially when it comes to my drinking water. I have the reverse osmosis drinking water system from Kinetico Water Systems, and I love it. It takes out the contaminants in the water, it removes chlorine, And most importantly, it tastes great. And I try to drink as much water every day as possible. And having Kinetico means I also use less plastic water bottles, which of course is also a definite bonus for our environment and a bonus for those dragonflies. So for more information, visit kinetico.com to find a dealer near you. All right, Angela, let's chat about, speaking of clean water and how important it is for dragonfly and the species of dragonflies. What would happen if dragonflies disappeared to our planet?
Right. I know. I feel like this is a question I get a lot as a wildlife biologist, why I care about this one species or this, one insect. What does it really, doesn't impact me. It has no connection. And I think that's, it's hard. That's tough to answer. Everyone values things a little bit differently. You can't necessarily put a dollar amount on the value of like a butterfly or a dragonfly. But, they do have a value. And we don't always know how everything is all connected when it comes to these complex ecosystems, especially when it comes to water. And so I always try to explain it to, like, it can be something like, your wipers in your car. Sure, if your wipers went off on your car, you still are able to drive it. Unless it rains, then you might be in trouble. Oh, but what if we took your brakes away then? Then it gets a little bit dangerous. So all the parts of your car work together to really make it a safe, reliable form of transportation. And I think the same kind of goes for when we look at how all the animals and plants are connected. It's the same way. Every piece of that machine plays a role, whether we understand it or not. And if we take one of them out, we're just not sure what's going to happen. And so I think with dragonflies too, the big thing is they're a really good indicator species. So they tell us a lot about what's happening in habitats that we can't see right away because they spend so much time in the water. So they're going to be sensitive to things like climate change or pollutants or habitat changes upland that are going to impact the water. So if all of a sudden we're seeing a decline in species, that kind of tells us, oh, what's going on in this water body? So there's some species that, like we always use the jewel wings, the ebony jewel wings, which they're just gorgeous. And I always tell people when you see them fluttering around and dancing on a stream, that's a good sign. That means you have some clean water there. Like there's something going on right there for that dragonfly to be able to fulfill its life cycle in that water. The other big piece too is I kind of mentioned their life, how their life can be kind of hard to gauge how long they live. There's a lot of things that want to eat them. So when they're in the water, fish want to eat them, salamanders, there's a lot of things that are going to eat them in an aquatic system. And they're really ferocious predators too. They eat a lot too. So I always tell people, think what's eating your larvae of the mosquitoes. Dragonflies.
Exactly. Let's not forget that. I mean, I think that's like the number one most important thing. They eat mosquitoes, ladies and gentlemen.
They eat mosquitoes, yeah, especially in the aquatic form. So even before giving that mosquito a chance to land on you and bite you, dragonflies are helping keep that in check. So yeah, they're just an important part of the food web, whether something's eating them or they're eating something, and that goes both ways in the aquatic and when they're in the air flying.
Absolutely. And, when I was at the Dragonfly Festival, I was learning just about little things that everyone can do at home, which includes lawn fertilizer. And they were sharing that, lawn fertilizer can travel in water systems up to 50 miles away from your own lawn. So that it's really important to manage, I know we all want these beautiful green lawns, but it's also really important to be kind of aware of how much fertilizer you're using.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing, especially in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. Many of us maybe have, a property we go to visit, or, some of us are, bound in the cities and we don't have a property on the lake. But even if you're in the metro area and you don't live on a lake, you have lakefront property. It's just very disconnected and you're far away from it. Your storm drains in your street are connected to a waterway. So you are responsible for some of that, water quality. And so things like what you're putting on your lawn, how you mow your lawn, what you're doing with your leaves in the fall. I mean, those are all little things that you can, read up on and do properly to help influence clean water.
That's true. I was reading something somewhere, and I'm not going to remember the exact details about it, but it was letting your lawn grow a certain number of weeks in the springtime. It was supposed to help the environment. Is this?
Yeah, and Yeah, and it's kind of the same thing with like even your leaves, like making sure you don't clean up your garden too early for insects and things that might be in the leaf litter. And so it's kind of the same too, like, that flush of growth, might have a lot more in it for when it comes to organic material that can, go into the street. And I always like to say too, like when you're mowing your lawn, make sure you're pointing the grass shooting back into your lawn. You're not shooting it out into the street. You're not shooting it into your driveway, because then when it rains, that's a really smooth, easy surface for the rainwater to carry that down the drain. But if it's in your yard, not only is that good for your grass, but that grass and organic matter is going to stay in your lawn, not go down the drain.
Very good tips. I also want to chat about how many species of dragonflies exist, and I think this number is going to shock people, Angela. But before you get there, I want to say a quick thank you to Minnesota DNR for Minnesota's wildlife management areas are an array of lands all across Minnesota. There are approximately 1,400 wildlife management areas that are important for the protection of wildlife and Minnesota's outdoor recreation opportunities. To find out more about Minnesota wildlife management areas, go to mndnr.gov/WMAS. Also, thank you to North Dakota Tourism.
Start planning your fall hunt in North Dakota at legendarynd.com. North Dakota is home to more than 800,000 plots, hunting acres. Those acres are private land that is open to public hunting, and the plots map guides show you exactly where all that land sits. North Dakota's ringneck pheasant crowing counts are up 15% this year, and of course that takes good habitat. The state is also home to an estimated 2.9 million breeding ducks. North Dakota, it's an absolute outdoor oasis just waiting. Bag your limit this fall in North Dakota. Visit legendarynd.com.
Do you really know what it costs to heat your water at your home, cabin, or business? No? Well, we do. Based on data from the U.S. Department of Energy, the average annual savings for homes that heat their water with propane rather than electricity is $175. You can save energy and get 2.5 times as much hot water compared to the average electric water heater. So let's save energy and money with the cleaner, greener fuel. Propane, the right energy right now. All right, Angela. Let's chat about the actual number of dragonfly species that are out there. And I actually know that you are finding new species every single year. So where are we at with the actual number of species currently?
So I think right now we're at 150 or 151, but right around there. And this was the big fact that got me hooked, is because I kind of just maybe thought, oh, there's the little blue ones that land on my fishing pole when I'm out and on the lake, and there's that big blue and green one that I sometimes see, but I never really thought like, oh my God, there's 150? Are you kidding me? Like, this is really cool. I want to learn them all. I want to see how they're different. And then actually like partaking in catching one and getting it in the net and holding it, because yes, you can actually hold a dragonfly. It's not like a butterfly where you have to be delicate and you might wreck its wings by taking the scales off. You can actually hold dragonflies pretty safely. And so that's what hooked me. Like, it was like I have to catch them all and I have to figure out what they are. Birding, you might hear it or you might see it and then it's gone and you never know. But with the dragonfly, it's like this hunt of going after it and running through a field and swooping in a net. You just feel like a kid again. It's exciting.
You do feel like a kid again. I had an opportunity to do that at the Dragonfly Festival. And if you haven't been to the Dragonfly Festival, I don't know if you're holding it again next summer. Hopefully we are. But,
yes, the plan is to keep doing that every year in July.
It's so fun. You have to, you get to experience all parts of dragonflies, but they do give you a net and you are allowed to run into the field and try to capture your own dragonfly. And I have to tell you, Angela, it's not that easy. I think it requires a little bit of practice.
Yeah,
I've been a lot of air.
Yep. You'll be taking some breathers. I even feel like now I'll even make some of the, the kids seem to be the ones that can catch more now. I feel like I've lost my touch a little as I stumble in the prairie and as not as graceful as I used to be. But yeah, it's just, and I think that's when you do it with the kids too, like they're just so excited. Like everything is so new
fun.
to them. And they're told so often, like you can't touch that and you can't hold that and it's going to sting you. Well, dragonflies don't sting. You're not going to hurt it. We can show you quick how to. And I think that's a really big thing for kids to be able to touch and feel it and see it up close and look at it in a book to try to figure out what it is.
It's so true. There was a lot of kids in the field with me that day, and they were catching way more dragonflies than I was. But it was fun to hear their giggles and their screams and how excited they were to be able to catch a dragonfly. And it was actually really fun to see how many dragonflies were out in the field that day too.
Yeah, and some have different emergence times where you're going to just see them earlier in the year. Some you see throughout the year. Some, especially the migrating ones, you might not see until the fall. And even if you don't want to run after a dragonfly, but you want to get up close and personal, there's always a table set up with both the nymphs and the adults to look at. And then they do like that screened in tent, so you can like walk in and they have the dragonflies in there. So there's something for everybody at all different levels.
There is. And speaking of something for everybody, Minnesota has its own Dragonfly Society.
Yes, so we do. We really nerd out and get into dragonflies, and there's a whole collection of us. So you can join and be a member or follow us. It's called the Minnesota Dragonfly Society. We had to go with that name because technically we like damselflies. And most people, that little blue one that always lands on your fishing pole that's a little bit more dainty, that's actually a damselfly. They're both in the order of odonats or odonata, but there's dragonflies and damselflies, and there's differences among them, but they're lumped together in that 150 plus for Minnesota. But dragonfly just seems to stick out more, so we went with that name instead of the Minnesota Odonata Society. We thought we'd lose everyone. So we went with Minnesota Dragonfly Society. But yeah, I'm a founding member of that. It was something where Kurt Mead, who is a naturalist up at Tetagooch State Park, he got a grant through the DNR, which again, we're always so thankful for those grants. They make a lot of this work possible because there was a Minnesota-shaped hole is what we called it. Like when you looked at the records for where dragonflies were in the United States, there was just this hole over Minnesota where there wasn't a lot known. What was even here, what species, how diverse. And that's crazy because we have, how many biomes that meet right here in Minnesota, all our wetlands, such cool habitat. So Kurt Mead started that up with a grant and just like got a bunch of people excited about dragonflies. It was a big citizen science project where people just went out and started to help build those species list at a county level. And, it's really taken off. And, once they kind of accomplish that goal, it's like, well, what do we do now? I don't know. We got all these people excited about dragonflies. We have to do something. And so that's when the nonprofit formed. And we continue survey work. We continue pursuing grants. We work closely with the DNR to, if there's a species that needs to be listed or its habitat is going to be affected, we can kind of work with them to figure that stuff out.
And you guys like once a year do a big dragonfly search to try to find new species, don't you? I feel like there was.
Yeah, we usually do kind of like a big field trip. We try to move around and have it in different locations. Since COVID, we haven't brought that back yet. We do partner with Wisconsin too. They have a society for dragonflies as well. So we'll partner with them to do a lot of that kind of, just we want to continue getting people excited about it. So doing that and helping to add to those species list. I was just at a BioBlitz a few weeks ago in western Minnesota where it can be really hard, especially with all the farming practices out there. It can be hard to find some habitat to find dragonflies, but that's important for us to note and keep track of. So yeah, those BioBlitzes, we try to make those opportunities for people to help us continue that citizen science project.
So cool. Well, if someone wanted to learn more about dragonflies, where would you send them? Can anybody join the Minnesota Dragonfly Society?
Yeah.
Or areas that can learn more?
Anyone can join. So if you go to mndragonfly.org, you'll find just a ton of information on there, including how to become a member, dragonfly basics, so all the biology and how to survey or get involved are on there, including a calendar that will even list if we have events coming up where we're going to have a table. You could come and meet us and see dragonflies. Or maybe we're doing a survey and we need some help. So that calendar is really great. We're on Facebook. Just type in Minnesota Dragonfly, you'll find the Facebook page. Three Rivers, our nature centers are fantastic for introducing people. Our parks have a lot of really unique habitats, whether it's a creek. Like you go to Elm Creek, there's some cool creeks in the park. You can see a very rare dragonfly called the Plains Emerald at Elm Creek. You can go to Mississippi Gateway right there on the Mississippi, and there are some really neat dragonfly species that come out of the big river. You can go to our parks, our nature centers. Odonata Central is another great website. It's kind of like a just very focused iNaturalist for dragonflies, for those that are familiar with iNaturalist. But we utilize iNaturalist as well. So, you have a phone, you can take a picture, you can contribute to citizen science data of helping us, learn where dragonflies are. And then I'll give a plug to, you can listen to our podcast, The Wandering Naturalist. And we did a whole episode on dragonflies where we had different guests come on to talk about them. So check that out too.
Very cool. Thank you, Angela. I appreciate all your helpful information and cool fun facts about dragonflies. Again, next July, I know it's a little bit of ways, but the Dragonfly Festival is not to be missed. It's a great family friendly event that is put on by Three Rivers Park District, and Angela Grill, wildlife biologist from Three Rivers Park District. Cannot thank you enough for spending some time with us today in the Minnesota Bound podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate that. Also, thank you to Voyager Saunas, Kinetico, Minnesota DNR, Minnesota Propane, and North Dakota Tourism. Also, don't forget, as always, introduce a kid to the great outdoors.